My name is Sarah, and I serve in children's ministry. Today's reading is from the Gospel of Luke. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated.
Okay, everyone, good morning. It is wonderful to be together. If you're new, welcome. I'm Kainu. It's my privilege to pastor here at Vancouver Church. We are in a series called the Digital Fast. How many of you are doing some form of cutting back on the screens, okay? Looks like, I'm going to say 60-70% of the room. And there's a lot of mixed experiences. We'll get into a little bit of that. But it has been, we're at day 14 of 28. We're halfway through. If you're new, what we've done is we've cut back on entertainment screens, and we've tried to limit work apps to work hours, and really trying to have a different experience. And we're going to unpack that a little bit. But first, what I want to do is draw your attention to one of the most beautiful creations that heaven has ever allowed to roam the earth. It's the F-350 dually right there. So if you're curious of a preview of heaven, it's right here. Here I am in all my cowboy gear, and thank you. And I got my horse. My wife's driving the truck, which is something we're going to need to discuss later. But this right here, you know, it's called a Super Duty. This line of trucks is the Super Duty, and I love them because I want to be Super Duty myself. I want to be Super Duty in my life. I want to be Super Duty in the Lord. The Apostle Paul was Super Duty for the Lord, okay? So was Moses and Esther and David and Deborah and Mary and Joseph. We desire, don't we, to have a life of magnificence and of power and of impact. I want to be able to be dependable, durable, hardworking, able to get dirty and still looking good while I'm ripping stumps out of the field and hauling heavy loads anywhere you need it to go. I got it. Thank you. That man believes in me. I appreciate that. We have a desire for our lives to be able to carry a load and to make a difference. But there's a challenge, a historic problem with Super Duty people. It's because givers tend to be over-givers, helpers tend to be over-helpers, and workers tend to be over-workers. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we give it a bit too much. Super Duty humans tend to become Super Duty machines in human form. And it's a problem that we find in the passage today. Martha is a Super Duty human. She's overdoing it at great cost. She's lost sight of the importance of experiencing the presence of the Lord. And she's focused on giving to the Lord so much that she's missing on what? Is receiving from the Lord. And she's a hero to a lot of us. It's easy to pick on Martha, but we see ourselves there. Martha wanted to be Super Duty all the time, but she actually became super grinchy. She suffered from RGF, which is resting Grinch face. And why was Martha so grumpy? But because she was tired. She was overwhelmed. She was exhausted. She had become a human productivity machine. Do you ever get tired? Do you ever get overwhelmed? Do you ever find yourself worn out from responsibility overload, taking care of the kids or taking care of the parents or the grandparents or the grandkids or the friends or the people that nobody else takes care of, or taking care of the job or the house or the team or the school or the life group or the ministry or the church, and trying to do the right thing? It's what you're trying to do. You want to honor the Lord. You want to care about people. You're even trying to be wise about your own life. Do you ever have times where you're like, why is this so hard? Like over and over and over, this is really hard. And this is the spot that Martha is in. And when you get overwhelmed, when you get really tired, what do you desire? But you want to escape. Now, let's say that you go, well, yeah, I'm not really a workaholic. Okay. Maybe you just spend a lot of time working. We'll call it workism. And do you know that workism leads to escapism? So often we escape into the screens. There's this digital portal into another world. It's like, it almost doesn't matter where I go. I just need to go somewhere else than here. That's why we are doing this digital detox. It's why we're fasting from digital entertainment, trying to stick to work apps during work hours. And many of us have discovered that the tough thing about this digital surrender is the evenings. It's the nighttime. It's just such a habit at the end of the day, right? Just to go mindless. And whether it's scrolling or sports or watching the news, we just tend to want to unwind. And why do we need to unwind? But because the wind-up has been too much. Our souls are wrapped around the axle of our busy lives. So we're stressed out, and we need an escape. We've been talking a lot about smartphones and iPads and gaming, but I also want to talk about good old-fashioned TV. The glowing frame in your front room. News channels are rarely news channels anymore. They're entertainment channels, mostly filled with rage bait, arrogant opinions designed to create fear and anger within you so you'll stay engaged. Because if you stay engaged, then you'll buy the pharmaceuticals and you'll buy insurance from Geico or maybe from Liberty. I try to mute that every time. It's like my race to mute it before the second Liberty comes on. Nothing against, if you sell Liberty, hey, bless you. But staring at a screen too long, it degrades your humanness. And whenever you overdo something, there's a downside, right? Martha was pushing her limits and lost perspective in the work realm. She was basically rebuking the Lord. Imagine that. Can you imagine? Jesus is at your house for dinner, and she's upset with him. It's not a smart play. Aggressive words were coming out of her mouth because both Jesus and her sister weren't going with her high productivity plan. Like so many of us, Martha, she'd been building her identity on the ability to be very, very productive and to get things done. That's a defining feature of her life. I wonder what people would say about you. But she began to drift away from being fully human and became more of a production machine. But Jesus, he doesn't go along with her hyper-productivity plan, does he? In fact, he allows her to be exposed as flawed and frail. Imagine that. You know, she has been relying on a way of living that has the appearance of a God-honoring life. Yet ironically, it was more self-serving than she really understood. Sometimes when we're trying to get everybody else in line for the kingdom of God, we're actually serving ourselves by exerting that control. This is how it's going to work. If everyone listens to me, this is going to go better, including Jesus. It is kind of funny. You know, Jesus is one who is willing to interrupt our little plans and expose our flaws and our unhealthy motivations. That's why his disciples, that's why he calls them not only to pray, but also to fast. Because when you stop taking in the things that are just normal to your life, even good things, you find out what your attachments are. You find out what your dependencies are. You find how really hooked on those things you are, right? And so he calls us to fast and to reveal these attachments, and we discover those dependencies that give us hope for the short run, but leave us emptier for the long run. And same is true about a prolonged digital distraction. It feels good in the moment, right? Just binge. Next episode, yep, yep, yep. What day is it, you know? And have you ever tried, you know, think about, it feels good in the moment, but in the long run, it leaves us empty, and you'll know some of the effect of this digital if you ever try to interrupt a middle schooler playing Fortnite. You'll be taking your life in your hands, perhaps. And as adults, we get annoyed when humans are clamoring for our attention, especially when we're ready to escape, right? Or do that. When the culture's catching on and starting to realize that the digital impact is massive, we've been talking about this week after week. Actor Charlie Hunnam of Sons of Anarchy fame, he explains why he's not on X, Facebook, or Instagram when he says, I am so baffled by the whole phenomenon on social media. To me, it speaks to going the wrong direction, trying to fill up this gaping hole that we all have in us. I thought that was a really honest statement coming from a celebrity. I appreciated seeing it. Who could imagine that Vogue magazine would actually post a story for 6 luxury digital vacations, digital-free vacations? And Katy Perry, she said, I wish the whole world would take a Sabbath from social media. I don't normally take my theology from an American Idol judge. I do love that song, Falling from Cloud 9, though, I have to confess. You know, the culture is saying, hey, we've got to cut back. Remember that fasting takes away something good to make room for something better. And this is why Jesus called for this practice as a regular habit. Remember that, you know, I've heard so many cool stories, people discovering what they've been missing out on in the midst of the digital, you know, setting it aside, that children are more at ease and more peaceful, families sitting at dinner making eye contact. You know, whoever thought that would be a miracle? It was really cool. One grandpa came down and he said, hey, you know what? My kids just sent me a picture of my grandchildren, both of them riding their bicycles for the first time. And he said they've had those bikes for probably about 2, maybe 3 years, and they've not been riding them. And he asked his grown daughter, why do you think that is? She goes, I think it's because of the digital fast. They just decided they wanted to do something more interesting. It's all these cool stories about life that's coming to life, whether it's playing games or doing puzzles or just talking. One guy said, I've read more the last week than I think I have in the last 2 years. Another, a wife, she was, they were laying in bed and he was reading, and instead of turning on the TV, because obviously they decided not to do that for this period of time, and she just said, hey, would you read to me? And he's like, well, what do you want me to read? And she's like, whatever you're reading. He said, well, I'm reading like advanced apologetics from C.S. Lewis. And he's like, are you sure? She goes, yes, that'd be great. So he just started reading out loud until she was able to go to sleep. Jesus, man, he always invites us to something better, doesn't he? He's like, Martha, you are so distracted. You know what it means to be distracted? The dictionary says unable to concentrate because one's mind is preoccupied. Another way to say it is, if you're distracted, you are not fully present. Right? Say those 3 words with me. Not fully present. That is what Jesus is challenging right here. And what we're going to discover from her is this axiom, is that to stay more fully vibrant in your life, you must stay more fully present in the Lord. Okay, that's the punchline today, guys. To stay more fully vibrant in life, you must stay more fully vibrant in the Lord. We get distracted. We're not paying full attention. When our kids were little, we went to church on a Sunday. We took off. We're driving down the road when one of our kids said, hey, where's Sadie, our oldest daughter? We'd left her at the church. Okay? We turned around and scooped her back up. We were not fully present as parents. Anyone had that experience? Martha was not fully present. She wasn't fully present with God. She wasn't fully present with others. And guess who else she wasn't fully present with? Was herself. Martha was not fully present with God. She was so busy doing things for Jesus, she did not have time to be with Jesus. Yes, Jesus wanted her to be productive, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that were taking place for Jesus himself, all the work that had to be done for God. Martha was distracted by many things, and Jesus lets her know, hey, Martha, Man, you got so many things on your mind. But Mary, she just picked the one thing that really matters the most, to dwell in the presence of God. Now, Martha, she's a no-nonsense, get-her-done achiever. She's self-structuring, mega disciplined, high-effectiveness, productivity machine. That's what she is. And she is not at ease unless she is working or serving or helping or being dutiful as a servant of God. One man shared with me, he said, I have a hard time sitting still. I've always got to be doing something. Even after a long day of work, it enters my mind that I should mow the lawn or vacuum the car or take out the trash or whatever repair needs to happen. His attention immediately jumps to what he must do to make everything in order and clean and upright and hold it all together. And some of you, that's at the core of your being. You hold it all together. You're the one. He went on to explain, what I discovered during the digital fast is the only time that I sit still is when I have a phone in my hand. His smartphone is the focal point that captures his attention, and his overworked mind and his body are crying for rest, and he sees that as lazy and irresponsible, and so scrolling distracts him from the voices inside that say, work more, do better, be more productive. Don't be lazy. And there is something that Jesus wants. I mean, this is what's going on with Mary. That's why she's distracted. And there's something that Jesus wants more than Martha's devotion to service. Jesus wants her undivided attention. Jesus wants her undivided attention. Yes, Jesus wants her to be devoted to serving to him. Yes, he wants her to work very hard to advance the kingdom. And this applies to us as well, right? Yeah, Jesus wants, absolutely. Man, he wants us to increase the presence of heaven on earth. He wants us to pour out our souls for those that are around us. He wants us to make sacrifices so we can take care of the vulnerable. That's all the way of Jesus, and we need to practice that. But there's something that he wants even more than that, and that is your undivided attention. If you're exploring faith, the Christian faith is not a religion about being a good person. It's about knowing a good God who changed your life. And sometimes we forget how much he wants to relate closely to us. I mean, think for a moment. He wants your undivided attention. What is it that gets your undivided attention? Maybe for you, it's a who. Who gets it? I get such a kick. I mean, most of us do. When somebody first starts dating, it's so fun to live through them for a little while, right? And their undivided attention is on the boyfriend, is on the girlfriend. And it's a fun thing. It's a beautiful thing. And maybe you're past those days, but maybe your highest undivided attention goes to your spouse or your kids or your family or some really good friends. For some of you, it's not a who gets your undivided attention. It's what. It's the finances. It's the financial condition. It's the sales numbers. It's your appearance. It's how you look. It's your style. It's your hobbies that consume you, your sports. It's gaming that fills your time and gets your attention. And more often, so much more often, God wants our undivided attention. And too often we think God is something to be believed in more than we see him as someone to personally know. Martha was not fully present with God, and therefore, she was not fully present with others. Man, if you want to have great friendships, if you want to have outstanding family relationships, if you want to have a great marriage, then we all got to work at being more fully present with others, right? But when you're too busy to be with Jesus, you become too busy to be truly connected to those around you. As a youth pastor, I always had a heart for kids, but as an achiever with a touch of workism in my life, I'm sometimes not fully present with those around me. One high school kid was talking to me, probably, I don't remember, he was maybe a sophomore. This was way back. But it was such a defining moment. And he's talking and I'm hearing words, but I'm not hearing what's going on. Normally, I would listen pretty darn close. But who knows what I was thinking about? Maybe I was thinking about dodgeball that we were going to play, or is the band, is the guitar player going to show up? Maybe my talk, I don't know. But I just hear words, and then he stops the words. So that's my cue, that I need to respond, right? And so I'm like, well, that's cool. And he just gets this look on his face. He's like, no, that's not cool. My dad just cheated on my mom. And this has been decades ago, but it's never left me. There's no backing out of that. And what did that kid learn? What he learned is that a lot of people will smile and nod, but few will truly and fully be present with you. Jesus' highest, love God, love others. Those are distinct, but he doesn't separate those. It's very important to him for us to love each other really, really well. And I have to catch myself. Man, I desire to serve God well and people well, but I definitely, at times, spread myself too thin. For some of you, you want to serve more and more and more people, and you don't realize that you're serving less and less and less because you're bringing less to them. And Jesus is inviting you and to me to a different way of life, and he's inviting us to be more fully present with God and more fully present with others, and therefore more fully present with our own souls. Think for a moment about what does it mean to be more present. And if we're going to get there, so more present, what it means is more in the moment. It means more aware of what's happening around you, more aware of what's happening within you, more aware of what's happening in the spiritual realm. Not everything that's happening in the reality of our lives can we see with our eyes. And yet Jesus invites us to perceive more. And to be more present, we must be less distracted, less divided, and less numb. And how do we do that? How do we get to that place is if you actually want to be more present, you've got to practice. Okay? Just say that one word with me out loud. Practice. If you want to be good at the piano, you don't just go, hey, I want to be good at the piano, You don't just sit and watch other people. You got to practice. You got to work at it. You got to set time away. You got to walk away from other things. You got to enter into the awkward where you sound really, really bad and your brain isn't any good at it and it's not really very, very fun, but you have to produce skills that will lead you to freedom someday. And I'm telling you, the ability to interact with people is a harder skill than that. Practice being more fully present with others and practice being more fully present with yourself, okay? It's going to take practice. That's why a bunch of us journal, because I get a little more grounded in what's actually going on in my head. Counseling. A bunch of us do that because there's someone else giving you feedback and you hear yourself. And we do these fasts in order to become more present with ourselves. One of you said this about the digital detox, said, I didn't realize, I think you're going to say this. Okay, I'll just read it to you. There we go. I didn't realize that I was silencing the tempting voice of addiction by scrolling on social media. Social media was an escape that I didn't know I was using. Through the fast, I've been overcome with a loud, nagging voice in my head and realized I have some healing and some work to do. Have you ever wondered why? Some of you that are so productive, like it's what you do. Ever wondered why you are that way? And sometimes we just say, well, that's just the way I was raised. That's the culture that I'm in. I want to get things done. And there can be a lot of truth to that. But a lot of times, we want to be nonstop productive because it's a great way to silence the vexing voices in our souls. Multitasking, okay? Any of you good at multitasking? If you love multitasking, then you might even be into hypertasking. Doing the laundry while setting up a meeting, talking with your mom on the phone. Listening to a podcast while eating Chipotle and checking the weather at the same time. Felicia Wusong, she set out a challenge. Instead of multitasking, try monotasking. When you drive, just drive. When you eat, just eat. And when you wait, just wait. I'm thinking airport, I can't do it. Slow down your productivity reflexes and try to be more present in the moment. Like, a lot of us are doing a lot of things all the time, layer upon layer upon layer. And it ups your anxiety, and you disconnect, even with your own thoughts. And when you slow things down, then that way, when you pick the wrong line in the 2-lane drive-up at McDonald's, you don't go into a rage when someone accidentally gets out of order and puts you one extra car back. I've heard about this. And you can just relax. And you don't just jump on your smartphone and start scrolling, and then once you actually get your spicy chicken sandwich, you just eat it instead of trying to hammer out an email for work. It seems like a different life to me. And God wants us to be able to hear our own thoughts, and he wants us to be present where we are. Present at your home, present in your car. I wonder if there are a few people right now that maybe even aren't fully present at church. Is your mind where your body is? And do you know what's going on in both? You see, God wants you to be able to hear your own thoughts and be present. Another member of our church said this about the fast, said, I was extremely nervous about the digital fast because in my season of life right now, I'm so overworked, I'm stressed and exhausted. All I want to do is sit on the couch and watch TV when I'm home. I don't want to think, but just zone out. And my experience so far is I find myself very emotional, crying and not really knowing what to do with all my feelings. Without the television or mindless scrolling, it's made me think and feel things I'd usually ignore. We run from bad feelings. We run from stressful thoughts. And while you certainly can have unhealthy habits of dwelling in those things, you also can have very unhealthy habits of just living in denial. Proverbs 20, I'll paraphrase, says, deep are the waters of a human heart. Blessed is the one who draws them out. Do you know what's going on in your heart right now? And some of you think, okay, it's not all about emotions. Okay, fair enough. It's not all about emotions, but it's not absent of all emotions. Emotions are like kids. Don't let them drive the car, but don't put them in the trunk. And as this individual unpacked what was going on, listen to the rest of this quote. Even with all that, my last week and a half of the digital fast has been more peaceful, and I actually found myself with more energy, more time talking with the kids and having energy to play games, read, and paint, whereas before my time was just filled with distractions that didn't include family and feeling like I had no time or energy for anything else. Because getting absorbed in this thing that's promising the escape so often is just a lie of the enemy to pull us in, even taking a good thing, but getting ourselves saturated in it and leaving us empty. And so we've got to practice being more fully present with ourselves. Then we can become more fully present with others. That's the second practice that we need to do, is practice being more fully present with others. One scholar summarized sociologist Max Weber regarding the dehumanizing effects of the industrial age, the last couple hundred years, with its emphasis on quantification and efficiencies as creating, as he said, the iron cage of rationality with its little tolerance for the burden of human presence. The idea is that when mechanisms and machines and power became available, assembly lines became, and humans began to become a piece in the wheel. You didn't do everything. You didn't get your own water and farm your own animals and go get your own fruit and defend yourself and all those. It was everybody has a little part, and they become the machine and more refined, that everybody just becomes a part of the mechanism that's going on, that he calls the iron cage of rationality with its little intolerance. He would go on to say for human error or for the presence of humans, the human presence, the burden of human presence, When I heard that line, to me, it captured the alienation and the isolation that's so dominant in our culture. human presence as a burden? Do you think of human presence as a burden? I was going into Safeway. I had a few items I needed to get that evening. One thing I love to do is just pop in my AirPods, right, and listen to a podcast. And so I was headed there to do that. After a long day, I want to listen to somebody who's like 100 times smarter than me. I want to learn things. I want to move forward as a leader. And then I remember the digital fast. And then I'm like, well, technically, an educational podcast isn't entertainment. And sometimes I work at night, so I don't think the church police can bust me on this one. But I thought to myself, I'm like, hey, Kainu, you're leading a church that's going all in on this. So suck it up, bro. So I very, very bravely and nobly walked into the store with no headphones of any kind. Much more like Jesus. And so I'm shopping, and I hear this voice, hey, Mr. Kainu. And I look up, and it's this young man named Kyle. He graduated with my son. They played on the football team. He and my son started after school when they were seniors, a place where youngers in grade could come and explore faith. And so he's strong in the Lord and all that. And we had a good catch up, and how's he doing and his wife and all that. And my son Wesley, he said, yeah, he got married, yeah, Taylor, yeah. And she started a business, and this business is a service for other businesses and owners and what have you. And he said, hey, your daughter-in-law, man, she is awesome at what she does. Well, if you rewind about a year and a half earlier, I'd run into his dad. His dad is very, very successful in business. And he had mentioned, hey, I'm going to have Taylor do some of the work for us, and we'll see how that goes. Well, she's pretty much won all of his work now. And here's his son telling me, hey, your daughter-in-law. I said, well, what's she so good at? Well, she's right on it. She owns it. She calls them in advance. She treats it like it's her own. And the cool thing was, I was able then to pass that on to her and tell her, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. So proud to share a name with you. Jesus is always inviting us to better stuff. And he's saying, hey, you got to be more fully present with other people. Man, if I was at the self-checkout counter when I heard this, so that was kind of funny, trying to chalk while I'm doing this thing. And but what do you think would have happened if my AirPods were in? I would have heard nothing. I wouldn't have heard. And guess what? My money says he never would have said anything because I was sending the message. I don't want to hear you. I'm not listening to humans today. I don't want to hear about how great your day was or how bad it was. I don't want to hear a story about the difficulty that you're facing or the beauty that you're bringing into the world, because right now, to me, human presence is a burden. And so you're locked out. Message sent without saying a word. When you go to the grocery store, do you try to avoid people? When you're walking around your neighborhood, do you try to avoid people, or is that the reason you don't walk around your neighborhood? So you don't risk it. When you go to church, do you try to avoid people? See, we got to develop a biblical ethic of looking at people that's like Jesus. We got to develop a sense of moral responsibility to listen to people, and we got to reject the idea that people represent the burden of human presence. We've got to practice being more fully present with self, more fully present with others, and more fully present with God. Martha was somewhat present with God. She was somewhat present. I don't know what level you would give yourself right now, present with God. Maybe it's really, really high, man. You're at 8 or 9. You've been on a streak here. It's been great. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. I think that's probably where Martha was, somewhere in the middle. And maybe you're here today and you feel empty spiritually. But Martha, she's doing things for Jesus. She even has a conversation with Jesus, and that reveals that Martha's prayer life is based on a transactional relationship. Hey, Jesus, I'm doing this for you. Why aren't you doing this for me? Tell my sister to help me, right? It's a trade. She's saying, Lord, don't you care that she left me with all the work? Tell her to get off her sweet tail and help me out in the kitchen. And Martha needed to surrender control. So often control is a form of protection, right? We're trying to protect something, and so often it's our heart. I don't know what Martha experienced, but I can't help but think that as she's upset, that it reveals that she's been hurt before. Maybe she's being dishonored again. Maybe she's being overlooked again. Maybe Mary was always free and easy and she was always uptight and everybody was drawn to Mary and not to her. Or whatever it is, she approaches Jesus and she is distracted. And she needs to stop doing things for Jesus and let Jesus start doing things for her. She got to turn away from those distractions and she got to look at the deepest needs that are not being met by her efforts. And she needs to let Jesus meet those as well. You know, when we look at this screen, Felicia Wu's song, she's great thought she has here. She says, indeed, what we have discovered is in our digitally saturated society is that we have a remarkable endurance and capacity to remain attuned to our devices. It is the first thing that we greet in the morning and is the last thing we take into bed with us at night. In between meetings and activities, at any given pause, whether we are standing in line or standing in wait, we diligently tend to our devices. And why is that? It's because we're looking for life. We're looking for hope. We're looking for some good news. We're looking for the affirmation that somebody is paying attention to me and wants to make contact with me. And we're waiting for a download of life, and we're abiding in the digital, and we want to hear some good news that's coming my way, and want to see that somebody sees me and know that somebody knows me. And what would it look like if we could cultivate a permanent state of expectancy to hear from God? And what could we learn if we could learn to hear both the whispers and the shouts of God speaking? And what if we grew to a place where sitting with God in silence was fulfilling? And what if we could get back to silent communion with God while standing by a creek or walking the dog or sitting at the drive-thru? And what if my antennas were always outstretched toward God, checking in with Him as much as I'm always checking in with my smartphone? This quote goes on from Felicia where it says, what if I was filled with great expectancy? I love this. If I was filled with great expectancy that there would be a word for me, and that I could trust that that word would not simply demand something of me, but a word that came to nourish me. What if I knew that there was a word that revealed God's very nature waiting just for me? Man, do you wait on the presence of God? Do you discipline yourself to put aside the distractions so you can put all your attention? And even if that means bringing your pain in, I'm convinced that Jesus with Martha is like, hey, Martha, good job. At least you came and talked to me. Good job. Let's talk about that. You have pain. You have difficulty. You're frustrated with me. You're ticked at me because you had a dream about how it was going to be, and it's not that way. And you're ticked, but you're taking it out on your sister, and you're passively criticizing me by saying, hey, Lord, don't you care about me? Tell her to come help me. And too many believers, we take this rage and we put it out on other people when we should be saying, hey, God, I feel like you're ripping me off. I had a picture, I had a plan, and you didn't meet it. And I thought we had a deal. I would do good things for you, and you would do good things for me. And Jesus is saying, Martha, Martha. He's being so sweet to her. And sometimes He just wants us to come to Him with all that we have, that we've gotten right, and all that we've gotten wrong, all our shame, and all our failure, and all our successes, and just be in His presence and receive from Him. I want to invite you into a very simple discipline. We talked about practice. I want to invite you into a practice of listening to God. I want to ask you to kind of just keep your attention focused on the presence of the Lord. As you do this, just grab this little card. I want to ask our musicians to come up. And these are 3 questions. I don't ask them every day, but many, many days I do ask these questions. And I hope that everybody will grab a card. There's some extras on the seats over here. You can get up and move around to get one. That's fine. Or if you see somebody without, you can get them one. I want to ask you to grab a pen or a pencil or something like that. Should be one in front of you. And I want to just prompt you on this question. Lord, what do you have for me today? And then just sit quiet in that moment and just listen. Just see what comes into your head. And I want to ask everybody in the room, I just want to invite you into that. Even right now, just simply, speak your prayer to the Lord, whisper to him, Lord, what do you have for me today? If it helps to shut your eyes and just be quiet, do that. Just ask him, Lord, what do you have for me today? And if something comes to your mind, just write it down. It might be from the Lord. It might not be from the Lord. Just write it down. It might be the distracting thought that you just need to get out of the way so that you can hear. Maybe it's a sentence. Maybe it's just an image. Something came to your mind. Just jot it down or draw it out. If nothing comes to mind, that's fine. Just sit quiet and just say, Lord, what do you have for me today? If something did come to mind, just go to that next question. Lord, what do you want me to know about this? Of course, that final question is, Lord, what do you want me to do about this?